Let me first say that I was a teacher in a rural community, still the community in which I live. Everyone in my town under the age of 45 is a former student of mine. That's how small the world is I live. So if I go out on the street, which is not a street, it's a dirt road, if there's anybody I see, it's going to be a former student, basically. So high accountability for my world in that. It's a one-school district, which is odd in the world. It has a school committee for one school. It's a pre-K through 6. And 30 years ago, we decided not to use textbooks. So we based all the learning in the school around getting kids academically ready to contribute to the world, and we used our community as our curriculum in a way. So we had the kids actually doing the demographic work, the ecological work, the political work that nobody in our community was paid to do because we have a volunteer government, a town meeting-based government. It wasn't considered radical at the time because nobody knew about it. And I hadn't written about it, and the kids were doing great. The kids did really well. They went to a regional middle school, went to high school. Everything was going great, so nobody bothered us because we had our own weirdly different public school. It was not a charter, it was its own world. And it was the only school in town, so it wasn't like you could choose this strange school or another one. Just like everybody went there. It was a working class town where hard work really mattered. Most people were laborers, tradesmen, people that worked in factories, people that worked in woods, wood cutting, carpenters, or worked, there's a university that's not far away, the University of Massachusetts, Amherst, and a lot of people worked in support services there. So having a school based on having kids do real work resonated with people. Rather than seeing it as cutting edge, this town looked at it as old-fashioned. Like kids go to school and they work hard, and they produce real important things. My life changed when after 15 years, I went to do a master's program at Harvard and showed that work to Howard Gardner, and he was very interested in it and invited me in to work with Project Zero, his research group. And so that was 25 years ago, and since then, I have bridged both staying in my town and working and trying to nationally embrace this sort of message around fusing character with quality work, and that the two are not separate. Along the way, 20 years ago, I was the part of the founding of this organization, Expeditionary Learning, for whom I now work. And it was founded from a marriage of the Harvard Graduate School of Education and Outward Bound. And many of you might know Outward Bound. It's a wilderness organization. It's an organization that takes adults or kids into the wilderness, not to teach them about plants, but to change who they are as human beings. It's a character program in the woods, basically. And it's gotten a lot of national acclaim because kids that are adjudicated youth, kids that have had problems, that are dropouts, that are angry, go in the woods for a week or 3 weeks and they come out as different human beings. They come out with a different vision of life. And it really does work. Right now, many of the programs that Outward Bound is running are for veterans who have had trouble readjusting to the world after coming back from overseas. And it's a free program for veterans. So it's a program of getting in touch with your own issues in the challenge of the woods. How that relates to what you do in your classes seems a little sketchy, right? I mean, we're not bringing kids into the woods. What we did was we took the metaphor of Outward Bound and said, could we have that happen in school buildings? And there's two qualities to that metaphor that we brought from the wilderness. The first is this idea that you need to get pushed out of your comfort zone. You need to be pushed beyond what you think you can do. We need to challenge students to do more than they think they can. And that only by doing more than you think you could do you change your sense of self. That when you do something greater than you thought you could, it changes your sense of who you are. And that's what happens in Outward Bound trips. People think, there's no way I'm getting up that mountain. And then when they're on the top of it, they think, oh my God, I'm a different person than I thought I was. The other thing that Outward Bound says is that it's not about you getting to the top of the mountain. It's about all of us in your patrol getting to the top of the mountain. Your responsibility is as much to get your crewmates to the top as it is to get yourself. That's a very different notion when you take it to school. So we were fortunate to get money from the Gates Foundation to open small high schools, public high schools, most of them district, a few of them charter. And they're small. Graduating classes are no bigger than 100. So just to be clear for you who are in large comprehensive high schools, this is a different challenge. It's only 100 kids. But our pact with the Gates Foundation was we'll get all those kids into college. And we were allowed to open those high schools only in low-income communities, rural or urban. We now have a dozen high schools that regularly send every single student to college, everyone. We have high schools that have now never graduated a student who did not go to college. And these are kids who are first generation to college from their families. Why is that working? It's working because kids in that high school have a different mission than I had. I went to a public high school, and my job was to get myself through and into college, just me. And in fact, if my classmates did poorly, it kind of helped me. The worse they did, the better my grade point average would look, the better I would look. This is an entirely different paradigm. This is, we are all getting to the top of the mountain, meaning kids enter these schools as 9th graders or as 6th graders, because many of our schools are 6 through 12s. And when they get there, the principal basically says, this school is a river to college. You've jumped in and it's flowing there and you have no choice. You're going there and we're all going there. And when people are scrambling, we're holding on to each other. We are going to get everybody there. Your job is to make sure every one of your classmates makes it. And so it's a whole different vision. It's not a success if you make it and your classmates don't. So it takes the responsibility of success and puts it on everybody for everybody. Very different notion. That's what we took from Outward Bound. Now, in our new high schools, we actually did take kids on an Outward Bound trip for a week as 9th graders or as 6th graders, because these tended to be kids right at the point in their life when they were ready to back out from school. They were at that point in their life where they're in a tough neighborhood, where kids don't care about school, where it's not cool to care about school, where they have their group or their gang. And if they're a 9th grader or even a 6th grader, they're reaching that point where it's not cool to care about school anymore. And if the first thing that happens to them is to go into the woods with classmates for a week and get overwhelmed and cry and freak out and lose their temper and work it through and then succeed, get to the top of the mountain with their classmates, they come back and they feel heroic. They have a bond with their classmates now that they didn't have before. And every day when they're working their way towards college, they think, yeah, but it's not as miserable as we were when we were out in the rain backpacking, you know? So they've had that together. But I do want to say that that's a small portion of our schools that we've been able to do that with because we had some funding for that from the Gates Foundation. We have 160 schools that have that same mission and can't really afford to get kids into the wilderness, literally. So they try to build into their school program ways to get kids to work together to do important things, to lean on each other and to push them beyond what they think is possible. We have 160 schools in 30 states, mostly low-income students, but we actually have some schools that are in suburban neighborhoods where they're almost 100% upper middle class. So we have a real diversity. We have 2/3 of the schools of our network are district schools, 1/3 of them are charters, and we have a couple independent schools, a couple private schools as well. And for all of them, we're bringing this vision of connecting the work they do to real-world importance. We are also recently gotten into the world of Common Core. When the Common Core hit, we thought this is a new starting line for America. It's a fresh start. Not sure it's going to lead to anything great, but it could lead to something great because the Common Core standards ask a lot more of kids than they're used to. So for us, it was like, let's step up to the challenge. Let's push kids beyond what they thought they could do. Let's tie into the Common Core. So we started building curriculum connected to the Common Core, and now we're considered one of the curricular experts on the Common Core nationally. So we're producing curriculum for the entire state of New York. It's now being used in Delaware. It's spreading to other places. And it's open source curriculum, meaning we don't make any money off of it. It gets posted online. Anyone can use it. We're a nonprofit organization. Our mission is to help. So we need to get money to stay afloat, but we're not into this as a publisher. We're into this as to pushing our curricular method forward. So that's just a framework of who I am, what I want to bring to you. What I mostly want to bring to you are concrete examples and strategies of what's working in our schools. And what I hope is that you'll leave today thinking, a lot of what that guy said is like totally not related to what I do and my setting and that. But there were like 2 or 3 things today that are real takeaways for me in my school that I can use. A structure, a protocol, a project model, something concrete and useful. I'm going to ask you to advocate for yourself. So I would like you to raise your hand and say, yeah, but in my school, that could never work because blank. And I will try to address the settings and that. Because I really do want this not to be a theoretical day for you, but a practical day. The other thing I'll say is that I'm the last of a number of great speakers that you've had this year. And all of us have slightly different language for how we describe the very same ideas and structures. I am in no way attached to the exact structures or language that we happen to use at Expeditionary Learning. So when we use phrases that might be slightly different than Maurice or Tom Lacona used, you should just translate those into the language that you use in your building. Don't make the mistake of thinking it matters to me that you use the language that I happen to be using. Translate. Let me give a very specific example. We have a structure called crew. That structure means you show up as a 9th grader, you're part of a crew. 10 kids, 12 kids. You stick with those same 10 or 12 kids until you go to college. You have one crew leader. That crew leader gets to know your family. They get to know your brothers and sisters. They call your house when you're not at school. That crew leader leads a crew meeting every morning where people look at each other and they say, what happened? You didn't come to school yesterday. What's going on? And it's not the crew leader, it's the kids pushing each other. It's we are a team to get all of us into college to succeed in life. We're going to support each other, we're going to push each other. Now when you hear that structure, you're going to say, we don't have crew, but we do have an advisory structure, and it's slightly different. That's fine. It doesn't matter to me, the small differences or the large differences in naming don't matter at all. Some of the differences in how you structure it may matter, and those are the things you should ask me about. So here's where I will be alienating. If you say to me, what's the largest size for an advisory? I'll say, more than 15, I don't think it works. And I know, then you'll think, oh wait, in my school it's got to be 21, you know. I'll just tell you, my experience over the last 20 years has been, once it gets beyond 15, it starts becoming homeroom rather than a really together group. So how do we do that? We free up assistant principals, counselors, principal. Everybody has a crew. It's not just the teachers in the school. So we have to get more people to get those sizes down. But that's just an example of we happen to use a certain word for it or a certain structure. You would do it very differently in your setting. Please don't let the language I use be an impediment to making that connection. I've spent the last year filming the best practices in our schools because prior to this, I had to ask people to visit the schools. And now I thought, why don't I capture some of that on video as Marvin is brilliantly doing now for speakers. And so I know that videos actually have to be short. So these are 5 minutes or shorter. But I'm going to pepper them through the day. And I have a note catcher here that you can use or not use. So I'm not going to collect this and hand it to Marvin and Marianne. And if you prefer to take notes on your iPad, you can. But after each video, I'm going to give you a couple minutes to write down what you noticed, and then we'll do a table discussion on each. So maybe I will cue up the video as we pass these out. If you prefer just to write on anything else, that's fine. But I want you to have your thoughts pulled together. The reason I'm opening with this video is that my main message today is that we, as a nation, have made an arbitrary and crazy distinction between character and scholarship. That character is one thing and that scholarship is another. And I think it's nuts. Because the very same things that build students as scholar are the things that I think will build them as character. So when I show films today, here's the lens I'd like you to look. Where do you see scholarship, academic skills in this? And where do you see character? And I'm not going to differentiate between performance character and moral character right now. The reason being is I think it's a fallacious distinction. I don't believe that you can create a bright line between performance character and moral character. I actually think that character is fused in all of us, and that we have had great success in improving academics through working on both at the same time. So when you look at these videos, I want you to be noting, where do I see what I would say is scholarship, academic learning, and where do I see character, whether you view it as performance or moral character, which, I apologize, in my organization we call relational character. We use the word relational character for moral character. I'll be totally candid with you about why we made that decision. I worked with Tom Lacona when he and Matt first made the moral and performance character distinction. So when they came up with that, I was working with them on this whole discussion. I brought it to my organization, and in many of the communities we work with, we could not use the word that we're teaching moral character because of, it was too controversial. There was too much, you are teaching religious values and it's wrong. Everything changed when we began to talk about performance character and relational character. So just to let you know, when in my organization, when we're using the term relational character, how we treat others, it's been much less controversial than when we've used the word moral. Please make that translation in your mind. If you use the word moral character, I'm fine with using it. But there's many settings in which it has created controversy in the community to have a public school using the word we're teaching moral character. So, and it sounds ridiculous, but as soon as we say we're teaching relational character, it's been less ripples for us. So, okay, let me cue this up.
You need help or
I guess just dim lights is.
okay.
Hello and thank you so much for coming. In Winter 7, we've been working on an expedition called Small Acts of Courage. This expedition focused on the civil rights movement in the United States and the local community members whose small acts needed to be captured for all to read.
Today we just finished our culminating event for our expedition, Small Acts of Courage. This is an expedition that focused on the civil rights movement, and we studied the civil rights movement and major events of the movement, and then students interviewed local citizens who participated in some way or had some connection to the civil rights movement.
Our presentation today is dedicated to our interviewees. We thank you for your time, and we thank you for your stories.
Today, as part of our culminating event, we presented our work to parents, but most importantly, to the interviewees, so that they could see the work that the students completed in their oral history collection, and they could hear the words of the students as they paid tribute to their interviewees.
Ida Marie Gammon Wilson's Small Acts of Courage contributed greatly to the civil rights movement.
In college, she joined students practicing for the Nashville sit-ins. They practiced how they would handle segregation at the lunch counter. They also practiced ways to stay nonviolent.
Ida was a part of the national sit-ins and also helped other students get a diploma by taking their places in the classes and helping them study if they missed opportunities to get information.
Throughout the sit-ins, Ida courageously worked behind the scenes to keep students in school and on the front lines of the integration effort. Ida remains active in civil rights today, as well as gay and women's rights. She is a great inspiration.
I think this expedition works because, first of all, the content is extremely compelling for students. Their experience with the interviewees creates an emotional connection to the content that they cannot get in the classroom, and really motivates them to work hard to write their stories and to present their work to their interviewees.
Julia Adams is a selfless woman who accomplished a lot in her lifetime. During her senior year, she befriended Josephine Boyd, the only African-American student in the newly integrated school.
She went over to Josephine Boyd and asked her to sit with her and her friends at lunch. This was an act of kindness that would change both of their lives forever.
Taking a courageous stand has had an impact on Julia's life. One day, a woman with a baseball bat was looking for her at school because she felt Julia shouldn't be helping Josephine.
Years later, Greensboro High School honored Josephine for being the first Black student to integrate the school, and at the ceremony, Julia Adams gave a speech. Even today, Julia Adams can be found helping others.
We want to set every student up for success. So we had a rubric involved. I taught kids how to stand correctly. We talked about eye contact, volume, speaking slowly and clearly, and we practiced those skills in my classroom. There also was rehearsing, where we took the students through the process of what would happen at the culminating event, and it all felt very familiar to them today.
Windsor 7 is honored to present our 4-volume collection of oral histories related to the Civil Rights Movement to the African American Collection of Maine. Thank you for supporting us throughout this project.
Sometimes it's not possible to get every student in front of an audience. So it's important to build in some structure where students can celebrate their work and share their work with a significant adult. And we often find a reception after the event really works well for this.
You know, it's really wonderful to find that something small that we did has an impact on the next generation.
It felt good to do it. Her story was important because she helped Josephine Boyd become the first African American to integrate Greensboro High School, and her story needs to be heard.
Culminating events are a time when every student's work is celebrated, where every student has the opportunity to be a part of their individual success and the group success.
It was an honor, I guess, to be able to present her story to her and show her how much she actually affected people.
And to have their work appreciated and to share that with the community and to realize their work is a part of something much bigger.
Textbooks are often behind the times. They do not reflect how we are and where we've come from and where we've come to. And this kind of presentation by these young people, I think, will be just an absolute wonderful experience for everybody to have, because we are making some strides in this